Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Anshuman Magazine.
Sir, you are online, sir.
Sorry, I can't see the audience. First of all, apologize that I could not be there physically. Normally, I'm always there for the RICS conference, but this time, I regret due to unavoidable circumstances, I couldn't be there. But thanks to technology, I'm able to talk to you digitally, and this same technology, which enables me to talk to you without being there physically, I think is going to change the real estate industry. What I've seen in the last few years, there has been a big uh, improvement in all the technology we use in real estate, be it in construction technology, being analyzing workforce behavior. There's a lot of work going on workplace strategies in office, in office especially, which will again change how corporates operate out of their workplace. To technology in doing analysis, digitization of land, to portals. There is a big, in fact, the technological change is faster than what we expected. So going forward, I feel technology will be a game changer for the real estate industry. We are also currently in a very interesting phase of the real estate um, environment in the country. There's so much happening. We last few years have been slow. The residential market has not been performing the way it should be. In fact, I would say this is one of the um, few times I've seen that the slow real estate market has really extended for so many years. Normally, in the past, whenever there was a slowdown, we did see recovery much faster. But the good part is, the positive side is that whilst the residential, especially the real estate market, has been slow, there's lots happening right now from RERA coming in, which initially I'm sure will create a bit of issues because developers have to get used to the registration, getting used to all the details. But this RERA itself, the real estate regulator bill, will be a game changer for the industry. It will significantly improve the confidence in the real estate market of both individual investors, consumers, end users for residential, to institutional investors, both foreign and domestic. And I feel once things settle down, next 6 to 9 months, as far as RERA is concerned, investment in real estate is going to go up. And I feel slowly the residential market will start turning around. In fact, we are already seeing residential sales picking up in certain micro markets, although overall, of course, the residential market continues to be slow, but there are early signs of improvement. If you look at GST coming in, which again will be a big uh, change, which will come in the way the whole economy works, but also for our logistics business in the real estate market, we'll see investments coming in, large format of logistic developments coming in. We are already seeing several international and domestic logistics companies looking very actively at real estate in India, logistics, real estate, land, and I expect in next few months the money will start trickling in the logistics sector. There's also, of course, everybody's waiting for REIT to come in. Again, we're hoping REIT would come in by there'll be first REIT which is expected to come in this year. I hope it does happen. There's a lot of activity happening there. So we are at a very interesting point in time for real estate in India. If you look at the office real estate space, in last 2 years, if we add 43 million of square feet of space which was taken up last year, and 38 previously, we almost are sorry, 33. So India has absorbed close to 73, 75 million square feet of office space in last 2 years, which I would say is unparalleled. There are very few countries in the world where that much office space is being absorbed. And this year, it's early days, what will happen, but the momentum is there, and that will keep the market going on. So really interesting times. We also expect the GDP, the real estate's the part of the GDP from going up from 6% which was there in 2013 to 13% by 2025. So again, for 2017, we expect approximately $7 billion of investment going into real estate. So we are in interesting times. I'm quite optimistic that after last few years of gloom and doom, things are picking up, things are looking positive with all the support from the government, with all the money going into infrastructure, and the market sentiment slowly changing, with funding slowly starting to come back into the market. I think next few years for real estate will be very exciting. And I hope that today's conference will discuss a lot of what I had mentioned, and it'll be very interesting for all of you, not only to learn, but also to share on what is happening latest in the real estate market, and how we can go to the next level from where we are. So thanks very much. I just want to apologize again that I could not be there physically, but I'm thankful that I got an opportunity to speak to all of you, and I hope you have a good next 2 days where you find this conference useful. I also want to thank Sachin Sandhir and his team from RICS, who have, it's like I always mention that coming to conferences seems easy, but there's a lot of work which goes on behind arranging a conference, getting the best people there, and really making it a success. So thank you, and also the sponsors. Thank you once again, and I hope you have next 2 days are useful for all of you.
We'd like to thank Mr. Magazine for sharing his thoughts and views with us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to deliver the special address, please join me in welcoming to the podium co-owner and corporate chairman, RMZ Corporation, Mr. Raj Menda.
Good morning, everybody. I was asked to explain to you all as to how RMZ chose commercial real estate, and whether you all can learn from the way we've grown our business. We started 14 and a half years ago, and we chose to develop commercial real estate as opposed to residential, which is normally a default setting for most developers entering the business, simply because I think residential gave the opportunity of taking on multiple projects with other people's money, and in terms of the customer's money, and in terms of commercial real estate, in terms of owning the office, it was either you put the capital in and should have the skill to raise the capital. So when we started 14 and a half years ago, one of the lines which I remember, which inspired me, I said, in the gold rush, the only people who made the money were the people who sold the pickaxes and the shovels. So I thought that was a similar theme when it comes to the IT business out here, which which had continued to grow in the last 14, 15 years, in which period we've also similarly grown our business. I think a few thoughts which help us to stay on course is what I would like to share with you today in terms of as to what RMZ does. We constantly keep updating ourselves with the new moves that are happening in businesses, in scenarios, and a few themes which we are currently thinking about. Is I find that the countries in the current period are getting more insular. They're inward looking. They're trying not to get their jobs outsourced, and they're also trying to hold a lot of their corporations within their own country. So and so they're reducing taxes to keep them there. So I find that this theme is going to be the theme for the next decade or so, and how it's going to affect different countries has to be seen. In fact, the easiest one to tax, what I'm observing, unfortunately, is the outsourcing for IT. And this is not the H-1B, which is what we read about in the paper. It's basically the work coming into India. And if it's getting done here, the governments are looking at taxing those countries simply because it's a single point tax. It's easy to tax it. Of course, I personally hope they don't do it, but I find that they're hinting at that way to increase tax. So that's one thing we keep thinking about and keep watching the moves of the various countries, because that will directly affect the outsourcing work that happens in this country. We also anticipate 2017 to be a year of challenges, which we estimate. We personally believe that one of the three countries is going to hit a big surprise on us, unfortunately, which will put the whole world in a spin. We hope none of those three countries, I'm basically referring to either North Korea, the French election, or the China bubble, which should not cause panic, because those kind of panics do create a lot of capital from not moving around the world, and everybody just stops taking decisions. So we personally believe that 2017 as an organization, we are keeping a lot of capital, rather as they call it, the gunpowder dry, so that a lot of opportunities will come. The other opportunity I find that is coming forth is the implementation of RERA. A lot of developers I find will now compelled to see that their capital allocation happens towards completing their residential projects. Means also a lot of their commercial developments which they have done or partially done will be available for sale, which will again create an opportunity for funds and developers like us to buy into those opportunities and to take them forward. As you know, our business is basically in 5 cities, and Bangalore is the highest, where the absorption of the Indian office space in Bangalore is close to about 50% of India's office absorption. And also, if I'm not mistaken, Bangalore will be the highest new office absorption in the world, and I believe that has been happening for the last 2-3 years. Our growth also is keeping in line with where the office we believe will be absorbed. That will be in Bangalore, followed by NCR, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Chennai, and Pune. So that's in the same order in which we believe our geographic spread is also in the same, follows the same order. The good part in India is India still has the highest amount of English-speaking graduates being churned out year on year, and that is continuing to give a healthy supply on the manpower side, which helps a lot of companies to come into India. One of the index which I usually use personally is to understand as to is the shake, is it going to affect our business? I find that a lot of companies have hard and soft options with us in terms of the take-up of office space. And I do find that 100% of all companies not only take up the options of hard and soft options with us, but also take it ahead of time, which only goes to show that the manpower planning and the growth plan seems to be keeping ahead of what they had planned for India, which is also a good sign, and that this trend continues at this moment. I do find that a lot of large corporations had kept a lot of their major new outsourcing decisions on hold, especially from the US, keeping the Trump administration putting a lot of fear into them. But I find that slowly they seem to be coming back and discussing their growth plans yet again, which is a good news for us. Bangalore, as you are aware, the reason why it attracts the highest talent pool in India, despite the appalling infrastructure, which unfortunately the government is not keeping pace and providing the adequate infrastructure, simply comes because what we find is the youth prefers Bangalore because it is a city which is the most conducive to work, live, and is cost effective. A lot of youth I find that have not only, and most of them being singles, find that they have a lot of money to pay for their rents and enjoy a good lifestyle to stay in Bangalore. And you'll also notice that most of them actually stay close to the IT parks that they actually work in. A lot of us talk about commute taking an hour and a half or 2 on a daily basis, but that's because we prefer to stay in the city center because we are the more traditional thinkers. But I find the youth prefers to stay closer to the workspace, which is about 15 to 20 minutes, and they get good quality housing, which is not the case I find in Gurgaon or Mumbai as a case in point. So Bangalore is attracting talent from that point. The other information I'd like to share with you is I find that when Infosys also, when Naren Murthy in one of his speeches a few months ago himself said that I have offices all over India, and they find that the maximum amount of job applications come to them for Bangalore itself. So it's quite surprising that despite having offices, the preferred choice to work is Bangalore. Also, I find that the expat community which also comes into Bangalore to get into the senior positions, is quite happy because they have a good community in which they live. They're also very happy with the housing, and also they have good international schools being able to provide education for their children. So when I speak to a lot of people who have come from overseas to to run companies out here, I find they're quite happy with this city. As you know, in Bangalore, most of the concentrated development is around the ring road, that is starting from the old Madras road going up to Sajapur road. It's just a preferred access location despite it taking so long, but a lot of housing and residential development is in and around it. And as a company, we lead market share over there. Last year also, as a company, we did about 57% of the office leasing in that zone. Again, in terms of how we position ourselves, every 2 weeks we get a new Fortune 500 or the NASDAQ listed, the top Fortune 500 top NASDAQ listed companies signing on with one of our facilities, all over the country. So, we all have a huge amount of multinationals coming, and to provide a standard which they are used to having in the rest of the world is something that we always strive to make sure that it's provided by our company. Our vacancy levels in our organization is at 0.2%, which also shows that there's always a wait list of clients waiting to get into the company. The reason I'm sharing all this, it sounds like a bit that I'm showing off. It's only that is exactly the place every commercial developer who wants to get into this space should endeavor to be in. What keeps me awake, I think I would like to just share a moment on that. What I believe is artificial intelligence and robotics is taking on a lot of jobs away from what is happening all over the world. And I was talking to one of the large companies which are doing IT and outsourcing work in India. They employing about 75,000 people. And they did tell me that they officially stated that 3,000 jobs in their organization every year is going to be lost in India to artificial intelligence. I mean, it happens to be in India, but basically it's going to be lost to artificial intelligence despite their growth. That means if they grow by 5 to 6,000 people, they'll actually be growing only by 3 because 3 is anyway being lost to artificial intelligence. The other one, of course, is we have to be careful of the new disruptive technology, because right now most of the code is, as you know, written in English. But again, if there's some new technology which comes and allows code to be written in Chinese or some other language, then God help us again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, we would like to take the time to release the RICS Cushman and Wakefield Research Report. I'm now going to request all our dignitaries on stage to kindly do the honors of releasing the report and displaying it to the audience. Thank you, gentlemen. And now, to round off this inaugural session with some concluding remarks, I'm going to call upon Mr. Anshul Jain, FRICS, Managing Director, Cushman and Wakefield India Private Limited.
Thank you. And good morning, everyone. You seem to be a little sleepy this morning, isn't it? Let's try this again. Good morning, everyone. All right, that was marginally better, but I'm sure Bangalore could have done better, but maybe next time. So disruptions, the RICS kindly labeled it as positive disruption, which is fantastic. But disruption word always brings an element of worry in people, right? We just heard about automation and how automation is changing the face of, perhaps the IT sector. We've heard about various technologies which are coming into real estate, which may change the way the real estate works. The question is, should we be scared or should we feel optimistic about the upcoming potential opportunities, right? And I'd rather be in an optimistic category, an optimistic zone where we're saying how will these disruptions create a stronger economy for India and a stronger domestic economy, which will therefore negate any effects of automation, any effects of of reduction in, let's say the IT-led demand in commercial real estate and so on and so forth. And I think if you compare the disruptions that's happened in all industries, right? So whether it's the mobile phone industry, where the Nokias of the world got replaced by computer companies making phones in a completely different manner and environment as we know phones today versus 10 or 15 years ago. Whether we talk about the computing industry itself, the whole work's kind of shifting to cloud. So what happened to people who were making storages and investing in software from a capital, from a buying model to now it's all gone down to a leasing model. If you look at the taxi industry, it's I guess one of the favorite examples that we all come across, whether it's Uber, whether it's Ola. The question is, have these replaced jobs, right? The answer is really no. I think they've ended up creating more opportunities, perhaps not in an employed or being employed by a large company, but perhaps more of entrepreneurial opportunities. For example, if you go back to Uber and Ola examples, what has Tesla done? Tesla has forced conventional companies or conventional auto companies like Ford, GM, etc., to think about battery technologies and moving faster into that area rather than forcing anyone to shut down. So really the question is, can the conventional industry catch up and are they going to be fast enough to change? And if they are fast enough to change, if they're fast enough to adapt, I think the world will grow. You'll see those companies growing. Otherwise, you'll simply see jobs moving from a conventional auto companies to people like Tesla. But the rules of growth, in my mind, will remain. And if I then bring all of that back to commercial real estate. So what's the sort of big three factors that we're looking at from a commercial real estate perspective, which is really covered in our report? So there are three, I would say, disruptive things which the eminent speakers before me have covered. So one is clearly the global socio-political situation, right? So we can call it global headwinds. So clearly there's an era of protectionism which is emerging in Europe, in US. There is the Brexit that's happened. China has kind of slowed down. Automation is working. So what is it? What does that really mean for us here in India? So as I said in my opening remark, I think the Indian domestic economy is strong enough, in my mind, to weather the support. So the IT BPM sector in the last 2 years, anyways, has been coming down as a proportion of real estate absorbed in India. So if the proportion of real estate absorbed in India, as Anshuman was pointing out, is about 32, 33 million square foot a year for the last 2 to 3 years. The proportion of IT companies taking that space from, let's say, 2014, 15 to now has come down from about 65% to 50 odd percent. There are other sectors emerging. Now, what are those sectors? It's one of the sector which is seeing some silver lining on the cloud is the BFSI sector, which is really getting pushed through the financial inclusion program of the government, where you've got banks which have now got to service a much larger demography as more accounts are being opened under Jan Dhan Yojana and other schemes. I feel very positive about the manufacturing sector, which is likely to create jobs and will have a follow-on effect back on the real estate commercial sector. While we can be very critical of the fact that the Make in India program hasn't really taken off in a big way, but as as with everything in India, it takes time. You've got three very important pieces there. There's policies under Make in India, there's GST, which is around the corner now, and clearly there's the infrastructure bit, where we're building some 125 kilometers of road every day on an average, connecting towns to ports, remote areas, and so on and so forth. So that will certainly fuel the manufacturing sector. And thirdly, the other emerging opportunity is clearly the Chinese companies and Chinese developers, both from sort of general corporate sector, but also from a development sector, who've been looking for growth outside their country and therefore looking at India. So there is a sector, let's say, which is reducing in its attractiveness, the IT BPM sector, but there are other sectors which are emerging, and smart companies will change very rapidly to counter this disruption. What that means for real estate sector is developers, as they know buildings which cater to IT BPM sector, perhaps that look and feel and the building shape and size and the thought process behind those buildings should start changing, and that's one aspect of disruption that I can see. The second is clearly the institutionalization, where most of the property ownership in India, particularly commercial property ownership, has been changing. You haven't seen much of starter sales in Bangalore, where you had leading developers like RMZ, Embassy, etc., really owning all their space or most of their space, as opposed to most of India, where starter sales has been very rampant, and therefore the ownership is very fragmented. Now that started changing around 2009-10, and you've got institutional ownership through people like Blackstone, Brookfield, Ascendus, looking at owning assets. Large Indian developers, most of them switched to holding more and more of assets, and now that's going to translate into REITs in the coming months, and that's very exciting, because certainly the professionalism in real estate increases very rapidly, not only because of institutionalization, but also with some kind of strong rules coming on the other side through RERA, and there's been sort of enough discussion about RERA in the newspapers, but I think I can sum that up by saying that it's probably a single most important legislation in the real estate industry that we have seen. And I think the way we've known real estate markets for the last 20 years, it'll be very different in the next 20 years with developers consolidating, with institutionalization, with professionalism coming into real estate sector. This sector will look very, very different, creating a lot of opportunities, I think, for professionals in the next 20 years. And the last bit of disruption is coming from millennials, much talked about, and we've got some good speakers later today who are talking about how millennials are changing the shape and size of businesses, and what effect is it happening on the way tenancies work, and therefore the new business models, which are co-working models. So we'll have a pretty healthy discussion later today on that. But suffice to say that a big change as millennials come in is we in India over the last 20-25 years, our social status is related to who do I work for, right? So typically if you go to a social occasion, a party where you met someone for the first time, almost the first question is, who do you work for, right? And that's your kind of social status. And I think that's a big social change that's happening now, because if you talk to millennials, they're non-conformative, right? So most of them want to work for themselves, even if they've gone and worked a couple of years for someone else for experience. They want to work for themselves, right? And therefore, and that's changing the business models, and that's changing the occupancy patterns, right? So from a real estate perspective, the big question is, in 10 years' time, will the ownership and management of the building remain same in 10 years' time, or will it get divorced? Much like the hotel industry, where the buildings are owned by someone else but managed by someone else. And herein comes the role of asset managers. Herein comes the role of the co-working concepts, which have today started, which about 2-3 years ago started with saying, how do I just cater to startups? In my mind, in 10 years' time, they will look like perhaps more startup catering, but also an asset manager of a building, where you're offering the whole building on an overnight lease, much like the hotel industry. So those are the disruptions that's coming. Clearly, on the base of all this is technology. There'll be a lot of technology enablers, whether it's in the FM industry, whether it's how you manage your basements, whether how you manage your machineries, how do you reach out to clients through that technology. So a lot of exciting things in the next few years. Very excited about where we're going. The report's very interesting. It covers all aspects. The cover of our report is, by the way, our new office in Gurgaon, which has been inspired by millennials. It's been inspired by the co-working concepts. So I hope you enjoy the report. Thank you. Sorry. So this brings us towards the end of the first session. I'd just like to propose a vote of thanks. So firstly, on behalf of RICS, the audience, we thank Mr. Menda for giving us your valuable time and being here this morning. So your the achievements of RMZ are great, and your insights on the Bangalore market and the markets and the commercial office market is fantastic. So thank you for your time. I'd like to thank Mr. Anshuman Magazine. I'm not sure if he's listening to us, but his insights into this industry is always very welcome. An industry stalwart for last 20 years, and it's always very fascinating to hear him. So thanks, Anshuman. And Sachin, as always, good opening remarks. I think it sets us well for the whole day today in terms of our discussion. So looking forward to all of that. As usual, this conference can't be complete without the sponsors, and it's not possible. So thanking the presenting partner, DLF Cybercity, a big round of applause for them. The principal sponsors, GMR Group and the Punjab National Bank Housing Finance Limited. Research partner, so I should thank my colleagues, research colleagues, on the great job that they've done on the report. Silver sponsors, Office, Colliers, International Co-works, Elegance Interiors, and Vedic Cost Consultants. And of course, our very own real estate magazine brand. Thank you, Realty Plus, to be the magazine partner. So thank you, and I'd just like to close by saying that RICS over years has become one of my favorite conferences. And as we were walking in, I was walking in with Jaggi, and we were commenting, we were talking about this to say that this is probably the preeminent real estate conference in India. I think every year the bar gets raised, both in terms of the online discussions and offline discussions. So I really hope that you enjoy the conference. Thank you, RICS, for organizing this. And thank you, audience, for being here. I hope you have a fruitful day.
Thank you, sir. But before you go off stage, we'd like to present you with a token of our appreciation. May I request Mr. Sachin Sandhir to please present mementos first to Mr. Raj Menda. Mr. Anshul Jain. Mr. Jain, may I request you to please do the honors and present a memento to Mr. Sachin Sandhir. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We also thank Mr. Magazine. Hopefully he can hear us. That brings us to the end of the inaugural session, ladies and gentlemen. But before we actually plunge into the thought-sharing and thought-provoking day that's ahead of us, why don't we break for a cup of tea or coffee and meet back here in exactly a half hour to begin the rest of the day's proceedings at 11:30. Thank you.